Oh, yes. If I go late because of the clock. That's right. Very good, thank you. We're going to be back in Numbers chapter 21 here this morning. Numbers chapter 21. Actually, we're going to. I'll start reading all of these verses, and then we'll start with the word of prayer. I'll give you a heads up. There's a lot of names. I think it was Michelle, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, commented about my enjoyment of names, especially in the Old Testament. Well, I'll just give you a heads up. There may be a few in this that may just skip right past. And so if you're following along with me, you may find ourselves in the next verse before you thought we were there, but just follow along. Numbers chapter 21, verse 10. The children of Israel set forward and pitched in Abath, and they journeyed from Abath and pitched in, and that's one of them, somewhere else in the wilderness, which is before Moab, towards the sun rising. From thence they removed and pitched in the valley of Zered. And thence they removed and pitched on the other side of Arnon, which is on the wilderness that cometh out of the coast of the Amorites. For Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Wherefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, what he did in the Red Sea and in the brooks of Arnon, and at the stream of the brooks that goeth down to the dwelling of Ar, and lieth upon the border of Moab. And from thence they went to, and that is not Beer, it's Beer, that is well whereof the Lord spake unto Moses, gather the people together, and I will give them water. Then Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well, sing ye into it. The princes digged the well, the nobles of the people digged it, but the direction of the lawgiver with their staves, and from the wilderness they went to Mattanah, and from Mattanah to Nahalal, from Nahaliel to Bamoth, and from Bamoth in the valley that is in the country of Moab to the top of Pisgah, which is looked towards Jeshimon. And Israel sent messengers unto Sihon, king of Amorites, saying, and see if this sounds familiar to you, While we pass through the land, we will not turn into the fields or into the vineyards. We will not drink of the waters of the well, but we will go along by the king's highway until we be past thy borders. And Sihon would not suffer Israel to pass through his borders, but Sihon gathered all his people together and went out against Israel into the wilderness. And he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. And Israel smote him with the edge of the sword and possessed his land from Arnon unto Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of the Ammon was strong. And Israel took all these cities, and Israel dwelt in the cities of the Amorites, and Heshbon and all the villages thereof. For Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab, and taken all his land out of his hand, even unto Arnon. Wherefore they that speak in Proverbs say, and let me skip these next few verses, because I have a Ryrie Study Bible up here that I use here from the pulpit, and he succinctly abbreviated. This is poetry. This is Hebrew poetry. It's kind of lost in the translation into English. He kind of gives the basic synopsis of it. And he says this: "You Amorites have beaten the Moabites, but we Israelites have beaten you." That's pretty much what verses 25 and 26 say. Wherefore they did speak in Proverbs, saying, "Come unto Heshbon, let the city of Sihon be built and prepared. For there is a fire gone out of Heshbon, and flame from the city of Sihon. It hath consumed Arab of Moab, and the lords of the high places of Arnon. Woe to thee, Moab! Thou art undone, O people of Chemoth. He has given his sons that escaped, and his daughters into captivity unto Sihon, king of the Amorites. We have shot at them. Heshbon is perished, even unto Dishbon. We have laid them waste, even unto Napha, which reacheth unto Medeba. Thus Israel dwelt in the land of the Amorites. And Moses sent to spy out Jazer, and they took the villages thereof, and drove out the Amorites that were there. And they returned and went up unto the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, for the battle at Edrei. And the Lord said unto Moses, Fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, and all his people into his land, and thou shalt do to him as thou didst unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. So they smote him, and his sons, and all his people, until there was none left him alive, and they possessed his land. Now, beyond all the details of this place, of this place, of this place, most of which we don't know where that is anymore, I think there's a lot of truths that can be gleaned for us today in application beyond the geography. And as we continue on with things that we are to be thinking, what are we thinking is kind of our theme here this year. We wanted to be thinking in the regards of learning to reconsider. There are things that we need to, at times, reconsider. And before we dive into that in this passage, let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you again for your word. I thank you for this passage that we can look at. I pray that just allow me to decrease, that you alone would increase, that the message would be clear. That in the midst of all the geography involved and the people and nations involved, that we'd be able to grasp what the truth is for us today and the application for us today, and to be able to rejoice in what you continue to do today. And I just pray that you just direct our thoughts and our hearts to you now. In Jesus' name, amen. Have you ever reconsidered something after the fact? Or let me say it this way, you have already concluded something, and then after the fact realize, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This isn't how this was going to work out like I thought it would work out. I would dare say that we've all faced situations like that. The story is told of a particularly famous singer. I don't know this person. She retired before I was even born, but Marian Anderson, does that sound familiar to anybody? She's a vocalist, a female vocalist. She had a rare voice, considered to be a contralto. I guess throwing a little Johnny Cash here, when Daddy sang bass and Mama sang tenor, she was closer to Daddy than the Mama, is how that works out. And she traveled mainly between 1925 and 1965. So in those 40 years of time frame is when she was famous, singing with orchestras all over the U.S. and Europe. Well, the story is said that she once was scheduled to have a concert in a small college town in Nebraska. And a college student, again, it's kind of funny to think today that a college student probably would not be interested in going to a concert that was included with a symphony, a secular college anyway, in most cases. But anyway, this college student there from that town was extremely excited to go to this concert, but she worked in a certain hotel and they would not allow her off. And so that entire night was just one thing going wrong after another, because ultimately she didn't want to be there. She wanted to be at this concert. The person that she couldn't believe was actually in her town, was actually giving a concert, and she couldn't be there, of all things. Well, later in the evening, who would walk into the hotel but this Marian Anderson? And this student, college student who worked at the desk, commented that, oh, how she longed to have been at that concert, but it just didn't work out. She had no idea that she was going to be, this lady would be singing at her hotel. So she was expressing to the singer how thrilled she was to meet her, but how disappointed she was that she had to work and not be at the concert. Well, the story is told that Marian Anderson took 3 steps backwards and gave a concert to this college student right there in the hotel lobby. An event that changed her life, if you could say it that way. A conclusion that was certainly changed from what she assumed. That night wound up being very different. Recently, a couple weeks ago now, when we took some time away in North Carolina, as we were coming back, I was making a comment. We had our honeymoon in Tennessee, Gatlinburg area. Loved the area. Even before that, Tennessee was always my state, and loved the thought of Tennessee. Driving through it was just amazing, and so we went there on our honeymoon, and that was amazing as well. And the area, and the bears, and the cabin, all of it was just cannot be duplicated. And a number of years ago, on my 35th birthday, in fact, it was like our first family trip back to Tennessee, and we had a cabin there again and thoroughly enjoyed it. Well, as time would have it, we would also wind up moving to South Carolina for some time. And in our trips to South Carolina and visiting and trying to find a home and a job and all that, as we would drive from Wisconsin to South Carolina, we would get to Tennessee. You finally get through Kentucky, and you get to Tennessee, and to me that was, now we're somewhere. Here's the state. But then you'd leave Tennessee, and you'd have that little section of North Carolina. And North Carolina at that point then was that last state. It wasn't Tennessee, but it wasn't where we were going. It was just that state that was in the way. And eventually we got moved to South Carolina, and whenever we would return to visit here, and Bob was ordained during that time frame, so we drove back for his ordination, and I think your sister got married during that time frame, so we drove back for that as well. Whenever we would leave South Carolina, you'd see the Welcome to North Carolina sign, and you knew you were leaving your home state. And we loved South Carolina. And again, from that direction, North Carolina was that state was just kind of not home, but not yet Tennessee. And so it was just that little wedge that just was, again, this kind of, we just got to get to North Carolina. Well, we were mentioning on our way back from the cabin that how at least my attitude has changed. When we got to the state line and it said, "Welcome to Tennessee," I can tell you in my mind, I thought, I've kind of grown to like North Carolina. And going into Tennessee wasn't quite the same as it used to be. And going there, as we made our way to Tennessee, it was, on the way to North Carolina, it was, hey, we made it to Tennessee, that means that we're just one state away and we'll be in North Carolina. And how things change as we grow up, as things happen in our life, as circumstances change. And it's interesting at times how the Lord works in amazing times and in amazing ways, in ways that we never expected. I was thinking back to our church fire back in 2002. Sunday afternoon, church fire. By the next Sunday, we had a spot, and I think Bill Dustin, Mrs. Dustin's son, kind of helped coordinate this for us, but we were able to meet at Martin's Lodge. And then from that point on, we met at the bank basement. And I don't recall if it was that first week or if it was later at the bank, but I remember, here we're kind of a bummer time frame. We've lost our church building, we're rebuilding it, and we're kind of in a temporary spot, and will anybody ever find us? Will anything work out? And I remember 2 ladies walking in as visitors, and I remember thinking, how did they even find us? Well, this is fantastic. how God worked that out is one of those ladies was Mary, and the other lady was Mary's mom. And what a blessing they both have been. And even if Mary's mom tended to pick on me a lot at times, what a joy that was. And again, how the Lord used a circumstance, and when you think in your mind, this is kind of a setback, this is kind of a, how are we ever going to get through this? And you're just looking at a calendar saying, soon we'll be able to get back in our building. We're not sure yet when, but we hope to be able to. Here the Lord blesses in ways that we never thought. So in these first several verses, number chapter 21, when we learn to reconsider, we have to see their background, but we have to be reminded that every one of God's moments, if we can say it that way, always have background. It's a situation, a scenario where this is what was happening, this is what I was thinking, this is what I was doing, and then God. And God did this, or God did that, and God directed me here. Being back at Maranatha again, and certainly we've been there numerous times, and I already mentioned already here this morning about our trip to Maranatha. But finishing up high school, taking the ACT test, and obviously going through high school, living in the Chicago suburbs. I had been to Maranatha quite a few times with our school, with our church, and for different events and college days and whatnot. And when I took my ACT, I said, and you can write down, was it three schools that they'll send your test to, your test scores. I did not put Maranatha on the list because I had no intentions of ever going to Maranatha. I had Pensacola, I had Bob Jones, and I had Northland, and no Maranatha. I had been there, the buildings were old, things really weren't kept up very well. It just really was, especially after visiting Pensacola and even Northland. And Northland is awfully cold. Northland is closed now, but Northland at that time was awfully closed, but an amazing campus. And I had anticipated going there. Obviously, my first year I went to Pensacola, Florida. Probably learned more in preparation for the ministry in my 1 year at Pensacola than I honestly could say that I learned in the next 3 years at Maranatha. Just some amazing teachers, and Pastor Jim Shetler, if you know him, sitting under him, was phenomenal, and thoroughly enjoyed that. My wife didn't grow up in a Baptist church, and her pastor was rooting, was it Crown or something like that? Something in St. Paul, someplace in Minnesota, don't you know? Was what he was pushing her to go to, and why she would go to Maranatha, I don't know. She had visited even some state colleges for music, and for whatever reason, really liked Maranatha, and it was Dr. Ledgerwood. It was Dr. Ledgerwood was the reason that my wife went to Maranatha, but even her family was, and her pastor and her church was a little confused, and maybe even distraught would be the word, of why are you going to a Baptist college? And why are you going to Maranatha, of all Baptist colleges? And as we just celebrated 26 years of marriage, to think that here, two people that really shouldn't have, as far as our plans were, shouldn't have even been at Maranatha. Here we met and just celebrated 26 years of marriage and 5 children as we, again, returned to Maranatha just yesterday. What a reminder. But all of the things that God does, He always works in our background stories. But the problem is that a lot of times our background stories often distract us from what God is doing, if I can make it that way. In verse 10, I'm not going to read, I apologize, but I'm not going to reread these city names. But if you can recall, up here they write to Edom, the king of Edom, and say, hey, can we pass through? Edom says, not at all. And he meets them at his border with his armies and basically threatens, you come this way, we will fight against you. And so then it was determined that they were going to go all the way back down to the Red Sea and go around Edom. Well, this map kind of looks like it's going through Edom, but they're literally going around Edom because they're not allowed to pass through it. Well, now most of the beginning verses of this chapter 21 are all in this area of Moab. And the Amorites, who were up in this area, had already conquered Moab. And so this is obviously Moab, but it's ruled by the Amorites. And so their background story is they're reaching this area, and they're going to battle. They're being faced with the battle. And in fact, they've asked for permission, and the result is battle. Now, ultimately, if they were given a no here, they had nowhere else to go. For whatever reason, God had closed the door for them to go straight north at this point. Edom had closed the door for them to head straight east at this point. They come back around. The only other way to get into the promised land from here is to continue heading north. And that door has just been closed on them. And so they're going into battle. And when you look at all the details of where they're going and what they have to accomplish, in verses 17 and 18, they sing a little song, and again, because of Hebrew poetry and it converting into English, it seems to be a little confusing, but nonetheless, they sing a song about water and war and moving forward. Verses 18, they go into Mattanah and Nathial and Bamoth, and they're in a valley in the country of Moab, and they go to Pisgah, which really seems to ultimately be a name that just means a mountaintop. It's not necessarily a specific spot per se, but they are looking out over, really from there they would have been able to see into that promised land. They would have been able to see into Jericho area. But a battle ensues following verses 21 and 22. A battle of, remember, these guys are, they're immigrant slaves, and yet they're about to go into battle. I have another map that kind of gives you a better idea of the regions. Here we have Moab, and here we have Ammon, which I was reading about. We have the kingdom of Sion, which they asked about, and then at the end of the passage we have the kingdom of Og, which is up there. And so that'll kind of give you an idea of where we are. And again, here's Jerusalem, and if I recall, Jericho would be up in here if I'm missing it altogether. Is it there?
It's not on there,
No.
but it is.
Yes. And so that's kind of the geography of where chapter 21 is. That's their background story. What's yours? What are you going through right now that is your background story? I don't imagine that growing up, we certainly moved a ton of times, and especially for a time frame there as I was growing up. Never far from one place to the other, but we moved from this house to this house to that house. We rented this place, and then finally bought a place, which we wound up being in until we moved them here to Toulon. But certainly I don't believe any of us have got the resume going on that they did as far as they went here, then here, then here, then here. But they're on their way to a place that God has called them to. But I also want to remind us that in all the background stories that we face, their background, in the midst of the background for ourselves and them, there's always a struggle involved. To verse 23, as I've already alluded to, here becomes a struggle. And Sion would not suffer Israel to pass through his border. But Sion gathered all his people together and went out against Israel into the wilderness. Unlike Edom, when Edom said no, he gathered his armies to his border and basically said, you cross here, you deal with us. Here, they've asked for permission. They're not yet in that area. They've asked for permission to enter through. We'll stay on the highway. We won't drink your water. We're not going to turn to the left. We're not going to turn to the right. We want to go down the King's Highway. And we're just asking for permission that will allow us to go through. Obviously, this is probably close to 1 million people, so you can't sneak through 1 million people. So they've asked permission, and permission has not been granted. But not only that, before they even have entered the area, the king of that area has brought his army to them, still in the wilderness. And so things could go from bad to worse. We have their struggle here in verse 23. One more place here they have mentioned is Jahat, the battle between Israel and the Amorites. Now, in some kind of geographic background, kind of going back to the first point as far as their background, the Amorites at this point have pretty much conquered much of the known world at that time. In fact, they've already conquered Moab, which is where they are now. But they were the force to be dealt with. If you could say, and I don't want to get too political here, but if you would say that the United States is still the strongest force in the world, the nation of Israel has asked the United States of America if they could pass through the land. The United States of America has responded not only with a no, but they've sent their army out after them. To kind of get the connotation of what's going on here. And so this battle with the Amorites is something that, well, they should not have been able to beat. The nation of Israel were not trained soldiers like those of Moab. The nation of Israel were not ready and prepared for battle as the armies of Moab were. But the armies of Moab went down, and now the enemy, the army that conquered Moab, is now set its sights on Israel. The nation of Israel, wanderers, servants, slaves, or we should say this, descendants of slaves, are being attacked by an army that has conquered much. Moses' account sometime later, as they would have already conquered these battles and are ready to cross, Moses reminding them of what has happened. He says in Deuteronomy chapter 2, "Then Sihon came out against us, he and all his people, to fight at Jahaz. The Lord our God delivered him before us, and we smote him and his sons and all his people. We took all his cities at that time and utterly destroyed the men and the women and the little ones of every city. We left none to remain." There was no question of victory here. As Moses is reminding them here, this is what God did for you. Not only did we go against the ruling kingdom at that time frame, but we left no one alive. To use the King James phrase, we smote them all. Only the cattle we took for prey unto ourselves, and the spoils of the city which we took. In real time, though, as it is happening, we have verse 23, when it says Sihon would not suffer Israel to pass through, and then Sihon takes his army to go against the nation of Israel. If you ever found yourself in the midst of a background story where things just seem to be taking a plummet to the worse, where we're going to make it through this, where things are going to go all right, and then suddenly things seem to just fall apart in your laps. Again, I would dare say that has happened for all of us. It is happening to the children of Israel right here. They've just traveled an extra 147 miles to go around Edom, and they needed to go through one more land to get to the land that God has promised them. And they've been told not only no, but we're going to pursue you even just because you asked. Things have gone from bad to worse. I know I've shared this illustration before, but let me share it again. Recall the humiliation of high school basketball one more time. We had a game. We did decently for a small church and a small school. I think we had 6 guys most of the time if we all passed and had good enough grades. Otherwise, we had 5 guys. In a basketball team, you have to have 5 guys. So when Bob, my brother, fouled out, which was more often than the rest of the team cared to admit, then we were down to 4 guys. And it's always fun to play a basketball game with just 4 guys on the court. Well, we went to a new school. I don't know why, and I know I've shared this before, but I don't know why our principal scheduled this, our coach scheduled this game, but we went, I think it was more into the Chicago area. And we went out on the court, never been there. It was an amazing locker room, we could tell you that. And then it was an amazing court and the stands and all that. It was like on no other we'd ever played at. And we went out there and we were doing our normal warm-up routine. It was just us on the court. And so we all line up at the free throw line and we all take a shot. And the next one takes a rebound and takes a shot and rebounds, takes a shot. And we go through that whole routine and then we kind of spread out around the kind of the, what do you call that, the key. And all one by one then, and when I say all of us, I mean all 6 of us, take a shot and kind of rebound after each other. And then there were a couple of guys that could do pretty decently well from the three-point line, so we kind of fed them the balls, and they would go. Keep in mind that when I say fed them the balls, we only as a school owned like 3 basketballs. And so it was 3 basketballs, and we'd bounce one, and he'd shoot while the next one was getting the next ball. And so we would just keep feeding him, and the rest of us were practicing our boxing out and trying to get the rebound. And so we're doing all this, kind of our normal warm-up routine before a game. And out comes the other team, the home team. And they come running out from their locker room. And keep in mind, every single one of those guys had a basketball in their hand, which just in that matter, we're thinking, whoa, they've got basketballs. We've got 3. Everyone on their team. And it wasn't just 6. It was like 12 guys come running out of the locker room, all with a basketball. And they do a whole lap. So we are, we're doing our practice, and all of a sudden they're running right through us. And so we just kind of stop and we're watching. And then as they make their way back to their end of the court, the first guy jumps up and dunks the ball. Second guy takes his ball that he's carried all the way around the court. He jumps up there, dunks his ball. The third guy dunks his ball. The fourth guy dunks his ball. And then the fourth guy did a layup, and then they just went back to layup. So clearly, 4 guys on the team could dunk. The rest of them obviously do layups. And nobody on our team could dunk a basketball. So I remember just standing there with our mouths open, just going, well, what are we doing here? This is like the JV team playing the Chicago Bulls. What are we doing here? And I remember our coach came out on the court, and he had a little clipboard. He smacks it against his hand. He says, guys, your hoop's down there. And remind us, we had to get our attention focused back to our spot. And I don't remember what the score was. I'm certain there are certain times in our life that your brain just blocks out bad memories. It seems like we were down like by 50 by halftime. And I remember several of us, as we went in, we just asked the coach, can we just get in the van and go? Because this is ridiculous. We shoot, they jump up, they catch the ball in the air, and they go down and dunk it on the other end. This is almost like a joke. This is humiliating. Can we just go home? Nope. You guys can go out there and you can do better the second half, and remember that we didn't. You know, there are times in life where things just seem to go from bad to worse. Getting a no is bad. Having the armies come after you, the army that has conquered much at that point, coming after you is far worse. And you could maybe come up with a plan B, or at this point, a plan C or D, whatever they might be at this point. But they're not given that option. The battle is coming to them, whether they like it or not. But then we continue on, and let me see if I can figure out, after they have some more poetry. Again, that seems to be lost in the English translation. Verse 29, they're rejoicing in regards to the victory, and verse 30 as well, they've defeated, and what is the amazing reality of that? And verse 31 says it all, thus Israel dwelt in the land of the Amorites. How did that happen? It was only because of God. And Moses sent to spy out Jazeel, and they took the villages thereof and drove out the Amorites that were there. And they turned and went up to the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, went out against them. Now, if I could go back a couple of slides here. Remember, Og is way up here. They only need, their intention was to cross here. But they have got a victory here, and they know that this kingdom of Og is another threat to them. So they're heading farther north for battle. And I don't believe that they understood what was ahead of them. But nonetheless, verse 33 says, and they turned and they went up the way of Bashan, and Og the king of Bashan went out against them, he and all his people, to do the battle of Edrei. And the Lord spake unto Moses, fear him not. Now, just reading Numbers chapter 21, this means nothing to us. Here comes Og. Certainly, they've just defeated the Amorites, so what's the deal with Og? And why would God say specifically, don't fear Og, fear him not? Well, what's the deal with Og that would cause great fear that wasn't already accomplished by the great victory of the Amorites? Well, let me refer to you what Moses says about Og in his recount to them in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained in the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead, his bed, was a bedstead of iron. It is not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon. 9 cubits was the length thereof. Now, a cubic, as far as an ancient measurement, was the average man's from his elbow to his finger. So it usually was about 18 inches. So anybody with math here, figure out what is 9 cubits. 9 times 18. Carry the one. Got all that? Should be like 162 inches. If you equate that to feet, that's 13 and a half feet. His bed was 13 and a half feet long. Now, typically, obviously, that's going to be a specially made bed. If you're going to make a specially made bed for a tall dude, you're going to make it long enough so his feet aren't hanging off the side. And so it's probably not likely that he actually was 13 and a half feet tall, but his bed was 13 and a half feet long. The breadth of it, as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 3:11, behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron, his 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man, or of an average man. So his bed was 6 feet wide and 13 and a half feet long. This dude was a big guy. Now let's go back 40 years ago. 12 of them went to spy on Canaan. 10 were bad, 2 were good. Recall? 10 men came back and said, the land indeed is good. It is a land filled with milk and honey. In fact, the grapes are huge. We brought them. The land is blessed. It is prosperous. We will do well in this land, but there are giants in this land. Giants that we cannot beat. Giants that ultimately, what they were saying, that will eat us for breakfast. Giants that will make this course of events impossible. We need to go back to Egypt. At least we will live there. And the 2 men said, no. In fact, there are giants in this land, but God is with us. We can take them. Where did they wind up going? 40 years wandering in the wilderness because they followed the voice of 10 men that said, these giants will destroy us. Children of Israel have their background story, but here's their struggle. They have just been faced a great victory, which they shouldn't have won. They were the underdog of underdogs. That basketball game I was referring to, there was no chance, and we did not win. It was not close. But there was a similar situation. They were that kind of underdog, but they won. How amazing is that? We're undefeated with God on our side. We can do this. Wow, is that guy big? There are times in our background, in our struggle, that we see things ahead of us and we say, God can't, I don't even know if God can get us through this victoriously. And he does. And we probably all have circumstances in our life where, how did that happen? How did God take us from destined defeat to victory? Praise the Lord for that. This is amazing. I can't believe it. And then we look on the very horizon and there's an Og in front of us. A 13 and a half plus or minus dude standing there saying, you looking for me? Have we ever had that in our life? I know I've stood eye to eye at times, not eye to eye, maybe eye to belly button, to some Ogs in my life, and I would dare say we all have. Where God has done a great thing in our hearts and our lives and great victory, but we didn't think it was going to be that big of an offense, a defense going on here. We didn't know that we'd be facing an Og, and I love that. That's like even Disney can't come up with a better name than that for a big guy, Og. It just sounds like a big man. But what is amazing is they had the victory in that too. Now I know that all of us have faced some difficult circumstances, and even in the most recent years. All of us have faced people like the Amorites that came out against us, and God gave us a victory. And we rejoice in that. But how many of us after that victory then have faced an Og directly after that? And how many of us when we face an Og, we're staring eyeball belly button and said, yeah, we can't do this one. Yeah, this is just taking a whole bizarre step to the unknown here, and we can't do this. Well, here's some lessons that we all need to learn, myself included. There's a background. God always works in our background. God moments always have background stories in our life. Don't allow the background story of our life to distract us from what God is about to do or to what God has already done. We also have to reconsider the fact that God is doing his work oftentimes in the midst of our struggle. Don't let those struggles lose sight of what God is doing or what God is about to do. Don't conclude just because I have this problem, God can't do something about it. Don't conclude that just because I have this unknown before me, that God isn't already aware of that need and the solution of it. That's their struggle, but here's their lesson. Lesson number 1, verse 34. The Lord said unto Moses, fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, and all his people, and all his land, and thou shalt do to him as thou did unto Sihon king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. What has God just said? Remember how they wiped out everyone? man, child, lady, the whole works. They only spared the cattle. They left nobody surviving. Great victory from an underdog. God says, don't fear this guy. Through me, I'm going to do the same thing for you ahead with him as well. I know he's a big guy. I know you spent 40 years wandering because you didn't want to face the big guys. But the time to face the big guy is right now. And he says these words, fear not him. Fear him not. How do you not fear a 12-foot, 13-foot man? How do you not fear a guy that needs a bed that is 6 feet wide for him? How do you not fear that? How do you not look at a 13-foot guy and say, whoa? Put that in perspective. Go back to the basketball. That guy's head and shoulders above the hoop. He doesn't have to reach up to make a dunk. He has to reach down to do a dunk. This is a big guy. How do you not fear that? But what I think is amazing, I wish we had more details, but we don't. And even Moses' account does not give us any more details. So I believe that there probably aren't any more details in this. Verse 34, God says, don't fear him. Verse 35 says, so they smote him. That's an amazing reality of an absence of fear. I have to say, I have to believe that there was still a lot of question in their mind. I have to think, humanly speaking, that they heard the words of God, fear him not. I'm going to wipe them out like I wiped out the Amorites at your hand. Don't fear them, just go. But I'd have to say, to get to verse 35, takes a tremendous amount of faith. So they did it. So they smote him. And everyone connected with him. Got to think if this guy's 13 feet, his offspring and those that he has around him are also pretty big guys. But the nation of Israel went off, and lesson number one, we have to learn how to trust and not fear. How to trust our God and not just fall into fear. How many times we have faced our own ogs. How many times we have faced our own giants. And our only response is fear. When God says, just trust me, just follow after me. You can do this because I will do this. Lesson number one they had to learn was how to fear him not, but yet follow after God. Lesson number two, and this would certainly be still more for the future, where they needed to be reminded of what God had done. This would be a circumstance in their life that would come up again and again in their life, and they would need to use this as a reminder. Deuteronomy chapter 29. It says this. Again, Deuteronomy, if you want kind of a reminder of what Deuteronomy is. Deuteronomy is the nation of Israel on the borders. They're ready to pass in. Moses can't go with them. And the book of Deuteronomy is basically Moses' book that says remember. This is what God has done. You need to remember these things about your God because I can't go with you across this. So Deuteronomy is ultimately the remember book. And he says that when he came onto this place, Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us on the battle, and we smote them. And we took their land, and they gave it for an inheritance on the Reubenites, and to the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And then here's the application for them sometime later. It's still the application for us today. Keep therefore the words of this covenant, and do them, that ye may prosper in all that ye do. Ultimately, what Moses is saying is this. When you face more odds ahead of you, and I won't be able to be there with you, remember that God has already given you the first og. Remember that God has already promised he's going to be there with you. He's already going to fight this for you, and he gave you that victory. As you move forward, don't forget the first og, because you're bound to face Og Jr. You're bound to face another Og ahead of you. But don't forget what God already did for you. Some years later, as a nation, they've already now inherited the land as a nation. They'll go into captivity. They'll be released to go into captivity. And in those captivities, we have Nehemiah. And they stood up in their place and read in the book of the law of the Lord their God 1/4 part of the day, and another 4th part they confessed. and worship the Lord their God. For half of a day, they're doing nothing but reading and worshiping their God. Then the Levites, I put the wrong verses up there. Let me put this one up here instead. There we go. Then the Levites said, you can read those. If you like it, there it is. You can read those, but I like this version better. Then the Levites said, stand up and bless the Lord your God forever and ever, and blessed be the glorious name which is exalted above all blessings and praise. Continuing on, verse 22. As they are praying before their God, they are telling God, they're reminding God, as if God needed to be reminded. What they're doing is reminding themselves in their prayer of what God had already done for them. Here they're in captivity. Years later, generations later, they're in captivity. But where did they go? Moreover, they gave us them kingdoms and nations and divided them into the corners, so they possessed the land of Sion and the land of the king of Heshbon and the land of Og, king of Bashan. Hey, things aren't going well for us right now here in the captivity. The nation of Israel is praying. Nehemiah recording. Things aren't going well for us, but Lord, we know you gave us the hand of the Amorites and you gave us Og. When Moses told them to remember, they remembered. This is generation later. They remembered. They remembered Og, king of Bashan. It certainly had gone down in infamy by that point, but they remembered that it was God that did it. And now as they face a new Og, a new Og, now they face a new world terror that they are now captive of. They remembered Og. You know, there are times in our life where the simple application is we can look back over our life and say, I remember when God did this and God did that. And I even remember a couple of Ogs in the past. But this Og is different. And we begin to doubt whether or not God can do. We begin to have more fear than trust. We begin to be overwhelmed by what is before us that we lose sight of what is already behind us. And I love these verses from Nehemiah that they remind us that they remembered God, the battle of Og, even in their situation right then and there, a generation later. And I trust that as fathers, as grandfathers, as moms and grandmothers, as those that have an impact on the next generation, regardless of what our relationship is, that we will be able to constantly remind those of the next generation of the Ogs that God has delivered us in. Because it's guaranteed there's going to be more in the future. But we need to be reminding ourselves of what God has already done. God has already done this. So why do we fear now when we face Og Jr.? Why do we fear when we face the Persian Empire? Oh, they're big. They've conquered the entire known world. But God gave us Og, remember? I marvel at that. We are now captives of the greatest empire of the known world at that time. And their prayer, their praise, their worship to their God is, but you gave us Og. So what do we have to fear today? May we live that same kind of life. May we still be reminded, I think I have one more time up here, of God always works in our background, in the background story. Don't get lost in that background story. Don't get lost in the routines of our day. Don't get lost in all the circumstances that go on from day to day. God's always at work in those backgrounds. But we also at times will have those struggles. We will have Sion saying no. We will have battles that come before us, and we will always have Ogs that stand rather largely in front of us. But we need to remember the lesson. Learn to not fear. And their action, they smote them all. Now, don't go out and just start killing people. That's not the application. But the application is when you face the Og, learn to trust your God instead of falling into fear. Because fear will always get you to stop. Fear will always stop you in your tracks. Trusting God will always keep you moving for Him. But also remember, then continue to remember, account for, recount. Tell your kids, your grandkids, your neighbors' kids, whatever it might be. Tell the next generation, hey, we face an Og, and because of God, we are victorious. When you face your Og, trust God instead of fear. So this week when you're standing eyeball to belly button to something, trust God. The very thing that kept them running last time, they utterly destroyed this time. May we have that kind of victory as well. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you again for your word. We thank you for the example of the nation of Israel. I know a whole different environment than us. I know a whole different covenant from us. But I do pray that you would challenge us in the application of what they went through, what they lived through, what they learned through it. And I pray like the children of Israel, even a generation later, as they would be reminding themselves in the captivity of the greatest might of the world at that time, that you are a God that gave them Og. And I pray that we be able to testify the same thing in our own hearts and our own lives as we stand eyeball to belly button to some giant before us, that you've already given us the victory in the past. You've already led us through trials of just as dark moments, that we can trust you in this one as well. And I thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.